succeeds. And so we are unleashing the power of women to take our rightful place in our national life by championing a woman's right to choose and defending Roe v. Wade, securing safe and affordable child care, preserving Social Security, and passing equal pay for equal work. Who's standing in the way? Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump. So here is our answer. We will remember in November when we will elect Joe Biden president, whose heart is full of love for America, and rid the country of Trump's heartless disregard for America's goodness. Joe Biden's faith in God gives him the courage to lead. Joe Biden's love gives him the strength to persevere. Joe Biden is the president we need right now, battle-tested, forward-looking, honest, and authentic. He has never forgotten who he is fighting for. And Kamala Harris is the vice president we need right now, committed to our Constitution, brilliant in defending it, and a witness to the women of this nation that our voices will be heard. Our mission is to fight for a future equal to the ideals of our founders, our hopes for our children, and the sacrifices of our veterans, our brave men and women in uniform, and their families. We will increase our majority in the House. We will win a Democratic majority in the Senate. We will elect Kamala Harris vice president, and we will elect Joe Biden president of the United States of America. God bless you, and God bless America.
That was Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi addressing the convention live. In addition to Speaker Pelosi, we've already heard tonight from former Secretary of State and presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. And still to come are Senator Elizabeth Warren and former President Barack Obama. But the big event tonight, let's be honest, is the address of the candidate for vice president. She is Senator Kamala Harris of California. And we'll bring you all of that during this hour. With us throughout our coverage are Bloomberg political contributors Jeannie Zaino of Iona College and Rick Davis of Stone Court Capital. So let's start with just a quick thought or two here. Jeannie, it strikes me as we watch Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, the first woman ever in history to serve as Speaker of the House, and now we're about to nominate for the first time the first African-American and South Asian American as vice president.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, yesterday was the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote, and we have the lineup of the most powerful women in the Democratic Party. If Joe Biden was to win, you'd have the second and third in line to the presidency as women. So it's certainly a historic night. So,
Rick Davis, I want to bring you in here as well. I mean, you've been there, you've done that. You ran John McCain's campaign as well as other campaigns. Tell us what Joe Biden needs from this vice president. How can she help him?
She needs to connect with the American public. This is her first introduction really at scale. And so I think the key thing is that she develops a relationship with the public who views her tonight and forms a level of personality. This is her last chance, unabated, not interrupted by any means, to make her pitch to those people who are going to vote in November. And she needs to do a really good job at that. And not only explain who she is, but then give the case for Joe Biden and take some good shots, as the vice presidential nominee always does, at the party in power.
Okay, thanks so much to Rick Davis and Jeannie Zaino, who will stick with us now, because we're going to turn to someone who knows former Vice President Biden very well and has worked with him through several administrations at different levels of government. Leon Panetta served as Secretary of Defense and CIA Director under President Obama and is Chief of Staff to President Bill Clinton. Welcome now back to Bloomberg. So, Mr. Secretary, thank you so much for being here. As I say, you know Joe Biden very well. You say he is a good friend of yours. Let's focus specifically on foreign relations. Put up for us a Biden foreign relations policy against a Trump one.
Well, I think the fundamental difference is going to be that Joe Biden believes that the United States has to exercise world leadership in the world and to build our alliances, build our trust in those alliances and the trust of our allies in the United States, and believes that if the United States doesn't lead, very frankly, nobody else will. And I think that contrasts with President Trump's approach, which has largely been to withdraw leadership from the world into an America First kind of approach, in which most of the world is just not sure as to where the United States stands. He's kind of undermined those alliances that are so important to our security. He's undermined our intelligence agencies by refusing often to listen to the truth that they're providing. And I also am concerned about the military-civilian relationship with regards to the military. I think it's important to recognize that the military is not to be used for political purposes, but is to be used to protect our security abroad. I think Joe Biden recognizes all of those strengths, and he'll restore basically the international approach that the United States has had since the end of World War II.
Secretary Panetta, I wanted to ask you about something slightly different, which is this intelligence report that came out of the Senate yesterday, this 1,000-page report. I don't imagine you've had time to go through it yet. But I wonder, I think a concern of some of us is that it's gotten lost amongst all the news going on, the conventions, the United States Postal Service, the upcoming election. And I think we forget this is a Republican Senate. This report comes out of a committee controlled by the Republicans, and it is a devastating report on Russian interference and relationship with the Trump campaign in 2016. So I wonder, what are your thoughts on this report?
Well, I agree with you. I think it is a devastating report, and it's a bipartisan report from the Senate Intelligence Committee. So I think it's highly credible in terms of the points that it makes. And, the concern I think that I've had for a long time with this president is not recognizing the threat from Russia for whatever reason. As somebody involved at the CIA and Secretary of Defense, there is no question that the Russians' primary goal is to weaken the United States, to undermine our institutions, and to create instability in the United States. That's what they're after. That's what they do. And to not have a president who acknowledges the threat from Russia and basically is willing to say to Putin, first of all, do not interfere in our election process. We will not tolerate that, and we will do everything to stop you. And then when he did not address Putin, when we got intelligence on the fact that the Russians were putting bounties on the heads of our men and women in uniform in Afghanistan, imagine the Russians basically paying to have our troops killed in action. But the biggest problem is that the president did not say to Putin directly, we will not stand for you doing this, do not do it, or we will take action against you. That is what the president of the United States should be saying to Russia. And so the report that came out basically indicates that there has been a relationship with regards to the Russians, not only in the election, not only in 2016 election, but that it is also taking place in the 2020 election. And that's something I think every American ought to be concerned about. And very frankly, the president of the United States ought to be concerned about that as well.
Secretary Panetta, Rick Davis, good to see you. Thanks for joining us tonight. The one area that Trump seems to have not retreated from is the Middle East. He inherited a major ISIS problem and unraveled the Iranian nuclear deal almost on arrival. But now declaring some victory with a peace accord between UAE and Israel. How much of that would Biden adopt as his policy in the Middle East, or would he take a different approach to these countries about building a coalition against Iran?
Well, I've always operated on the basis that the Middle East is critical to the security of the United States. And frankly, one of the problems we've had is with a number of failed states in the Middle East, from Syria to Yemen to Libya, that those countries become breeding grounds for terrorism, for ISIS. In particular, my biggest criticism with Trump was when he withdrew our forces from Syria and basically abandoned the relationship with the Kurds, who were working with us to go after ISIS. We basically handed Syria to Iran and Russia and Hezbollah. Look, does he deserve some credit with regards to Israel and the UAE? Perhaps. I think they were trying to work on that, and I give them credit for that because it is important to have these Arab countries recognize the security of Israel. That's a step in the right direction. But the reality is that the United States has to build an alliance with moderate Arab countries and with Israel to confront ISIS, which still remains a real threat to the United States, and also confront Iran. I think right now we have a very tenuous relationship with Iran that could produce war at any time. And I think one of the things that the Biden administration would do, which I think is a step in the right direction, is to go back to our allies, Russia, China, Germany, Great Britain, France, and restore that alliance that was working with Iran, that produced the agreement, and force that alliance to try to get Iran to make concessions on missile development and on supporting terrorism. I think that's the best way to try to get Iran back to the table.
Okay, Mr. Secretary, it was a great pleasure to have you with us tonight. Thank you on this very special night. That's Leon Panetta. He's the former Secretary of Defense. Staying on the subject of foreign affairs, one of the questions that will loom large in the inbox of the next president, whoever that is, whether it's another Donald Trump term or whether it's Joe Biden, will be our relations with China. For a view from Beijing about what's going on in this presidential election, we now turn to Tom McKenzie, our colleague, co-anchor of Bloomberg Markets China Open. Welcome, Tom. How does it look from China?
David, I just want to give you an update on how it's being covered, the DNC here in Beijing. You were just talking to the former US Defense Secretary, and on the front page of the Global Times today, you do have Joe Biden and the headline that Biden has now been officially nominated for the Democratic ticket. But down the side here, talking of potential military confrontations, you have a headline that says that the PLA, the People's Liberation Army of China, has sent a warning to the US Navy over Navy patrols in the Taiwan Strait. And Panetta there was talking about potential conflict in Iran. Certainly, and this has been the case, obviously, for decades, the potential hot spot, I should say, in this region, vis-a-vis China and the US, is Taiwan and the Taiwan Strait. And so that is an indication of the concerns there, those freedom of operation patrols by the US Navy still of deep concern for the Chinese. The other English language version of the newspaper, again, has Joe Biden on the front page. And the headline, as you can see, it says, Biden may be smoother to deal with. We talked about the fact that the Chinese were unprepared for Trump in 2016. They say that whatever happens in 2020 November, it will not be a black swan event. They will be prepared for either option. David.
Okay, Tom, it's always a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so much for that report. Tom McKenzie, co-anchor of Bloomberg's China Open. Throughout our convention coverage, we want to keep in mind how this is playing at the White House and specifically for President Trump. And for that view, we turn now to our colleague Mario Parker, who covers the White House for Bloomberg. Mario, welcome. How is it looking right now to Donald Trump as he looks at this convention?
No, he's paying attention, of course. Earlier this evening, he had a press briefing at the White House, and his final question was his final answer was in response to a question about President Obama's prepared remarks this evening, where he'll say that President Trump wasn't prepared for the office. So President Trump, of course, defended himself there. And his campaign is also out with rapid response, talking about some of the speakers, including Hillary Clinton.
It's fascinating. Thank you so much to Bloomberg White House reporter Mario Parker, who's really reporting throughout this entire convention for us. One of the biggest questions for voters in November is how President Joe Biden might manage a struggling economy differently from President Trump. We're going to hear in just a few moments from right now from Senator Elizabeth Warren. We'll bring you that live. But in the meantime, let's turn to Rick Davis and to Jeannie Zaino for their thoughts about what Elizabeth Warren can do for Joe Biden tonight. Rick, what does he need out of Elizabeth Warren?
Well, I think one of the things we're seeing, especially in the media, is a wondering why isn't the progressive left pushing back on this sort of centrist convention that Joe Biden has been orchestrating. And I think one of the things she could do is actually do exactly that, not push back and follow in suit as Bernie Sanders did of supporting wholeheartedly Biden and having policy difference for sure, but talking about how important it is that Biden beat Trump, because only then will they even have a voice in government that can enable some of these policies to occur.
So I don't want to even approach being cynical at all, Jeannie, here, but is there a possibility that Elizabeth Warren is thinking there might be a job for me in a Biden administration, just conceivably?
Conceivably. Yeah, and there is a school of thought that, you know, she may have more of a voice in a Biden administration as a secretary of something versus a vice president. So there is a school of thought, and she has been fundraising for the Democrats. She has been very close to Joe Biden throughout this process. So I think we're going to see a lot of Elizabeth Warren. And another thing she's out there to do tonight is to appeal to women. I think that's why we understand she'll be coming from a school, and she will be talking about issues that appeals to suburban women who are so important, and both sides are trying to vie for their vote.
So Rick Davis, I mean, after your sojourn into politics, you spent a little time on Wall Street. We heard Ted Cruz today, the senator from Texas, saying, boy, if Elizabeth Warren's the Secretary of Treasury, you know, Wall Street will hate it. It will really hurt Wall Street. Does he have a point?
For sure, right? I mean, she's one of the people that I think most Republicans are most fearful of getting into the Biden administration. But I would say Joe Biden, if he's elected, is likely to be a one-term president. And I strongly doubt somebody like Elizabeth Warren, who has presidential ambitions, would give up a perfectly safe Senate seat to go in as a staff person to Joe Biden and give up potentially her dream of running for president 4 years from now.
At the same time, just picking up on that point of Rick's, Jeannie, it looks right now like Elizabeth Warren is going to be a force in the Democratic Party for some time to come, almost no matter what happens.
She has been, and she's going to continue to be. And, you know, I think it's a big question what Rick is talking about. He's saying she may not leave. You know, she could also theoretically, depending on what the offer is, leave and go into the administration. But if that is the case, and if Biden is a one-term president, if he wins, we're going to see quite a fight for who's going to be on the top of the ticket next time around.
Well, and Rick, it may be too early in the process to start talking about the Senate, women having the Senate, but would it really be smart for President Biden, if we were get elected, to take one Democratic senator away, particularly if it's pretty darn close? We're about to go, actually, Elizabeth Warren. I'm going to interrupt myself because we see at the convention, I believe we're about to hear from Senator Elizabeth Warren from Massachusetts. Let's listen in.
Who put their lives on the line to keep our country going. And since COVID-19 hit, they've taken one gut punch after another. And what has the COVID fallout done to our babies? Well, I'm here at the Early Childhood Education Center in Springfield, Massachusetts, which has been closed for months. Childcare was already hard to find before the pandemic, and now parents are stuck. No idea when schools can safely reopen, and even fewer childcare options. The devastation is enormous. And the way I see it, big problems demand big solutions. Now, I love a good plan, and Joe Biden has some really good plans. Plans to bring back union jobs in manufacturing and create new union jobs in clean energy. Plans to increase Social Security benefits, cancel billions in student loan debt, and make our bankruptcy laws work for families instead of the creditors who cheat them. These plans reflect a central truth. Our economic system has been rigged to give bailouts to billionaires and kick dirt in the face of everyone else. But we can build a thriving economy by investing in families and fixing what's broken. Joe's plan to build back better includes making the wealthy pay their fair share, holding corporations accountable, repairing racial inequities, and fighting corruption in Washington. Let me tell you about one of Joe's plans that's especially close to my heart: childcare. As a little girl growing up in Oklahoma, what I wanted most in the world was to be a teacher. I loved teaching. And when I had babies and was juggling my first big teaching job down in Texas, it was hard. But I could do hard. The thing that almost sank me: childcare. One night, my Aunt Bee called just to check in. And I thought I was fine. But then I just broke down and started to cry. I had tried holding it all together, but without reliable childcare, working was nearly impossible. And when I told Aunt Bee I was going to quit my job, I thought my heart would break. And then she said the words that changed my life: "I can't get there tomorrow, but I'll come on Thursday." And she arrived with 7 suitcases and a Pekingese named Buddy and stayed for 16 years. I get to be here tonight because of my Aunt Bee. I learned a fundamental truth: Nobody makes it on their own. And yet, here we are, 2 generations of working parents later. And if you have a baby and don't have an Aunt B, you're on your own. And here's why that is wrong. We build infrastructure like roads and bridges and communication systems so that people can work. That infrastructure helps us all because it keeps our economy going. It's time to recognize that childcare is part of the basic infrastructure of this nation. It's infrastructure for families. Joe and Kamala will make high-quality childcare affordable for every family, make preschool universal, and raise the wages of every childcare worker. Now, that's just one plan, but it gives you an idea of how we get this country working for everyone. Donald Trump's ignorance and incompetence have always been a danger to our country. COVID-19 was Trump's biggest test. He failed miserably. Today, America has the most COVID deaths in the world and an economic collapse. And both crises are falling hardest on Black and brown families. Millions out of work, millions more trapped in cycles of poverty, millions on the brink of losing their homes, millions of restaurants and stores hanging by a thread. This crisis is bad, and it didn't have to be this way. This crisis is on Donald Trump and the Republicans who enable him. On November 3rd, we will hold them all accountable. So, whether you're planning to vote wearing a mask or vote by mail, please take out your phone right now and text VOTE to 30330. We all need to be in the fight to get Joe and Kamala elected. And after November, we all need to stay in the fight to get big things done. We stay in this fight so that when our children and our grandchildren ask what we did during this dark chapter in our nation's history, we will be able to look them squarely in the eye and say, we organized, we persisted, and we changed America.
We've been listening to Senator Elizabeth Warren addressing the Democratic National Convention and really going over the ways she agrees with Joe Biden and some of the problems she has with Donald Trump, the current president of the United States. I want to continue on the subject of what a Biden presidency would mean for the economy and bring in Lisa Cook of Michigan State University, where she is an associate professor of economics and international relations. Professor Cook served on the transition team for President Obama and is a senior economist on his Council on Economic Advisors. And besides that, she has been advising, as I understand it, the Biden-Harris campaign on economic issues. So, Professor, thank you very much for being with us. I'm joined by Jeannie Zaino and Rick Davis here, our political contributors. So give us a sense from your point of view, knowing an awful lot about this, what a Biden presidency would do over the next year in the short term for the U.S. economy that would be different from what we've seen from Donald Trump.
Well, the first thing is that my understanding of the Biden plan is that the first thing they'll do is address the national strategy associated with fighting this virus, fighting the pandemic. And I think that we wouldn't have a conversation now about a recession if there weren't this pandemic. So I think that's the top priority, to get us out of this chaos that is dislocating families, households, school children, university professors, everybody, businesses, everybody. The idea is that the economy has got to get back on track, but we can't get back on track without a national coordinated strategy.
Rick?
Lisa, good to see you tonight. This is Rick Davis from Washington. One of the things I wanted to ask you is your sister school, the University of Michigan's got this thing called the Consumer Sentiment Index. And as a Politico, having run many campaigns in the past, especially for national election, that was always my Bible. If the Michigan Consumer Index was below 90, the party in power lost. And if it was above 90, the party in power won. What's unusual about it right now is that Republicans in that index, self-identified, are actually pretty positive on the economy, but Democrats and independents are well below that 90 mark. And so I was curious if you've seen in your research this kind of distribution of partisan views toward the economy. I've never seen that before in the sentiment index, and so I was curious if you'd seen anything like that yourself.
That's an interesting and good question. And it's one of the things that I show my students. This is a fairly regular feature when you ask the American public about the economy. It actually depends on your political affiliation. Now, I don't know when it started, but it certainly has been going on for decades. So this isn't unusual. I think the thing that is unusual now is that the economic circumstances are changing so quickly. And my sense is that the consumer sentiment survey is probably a monthly survey, and we probably haven't seen it since the stimulus payments ran out. The extended UI wasn't extended, and I think it might look quite different now. We already know that Walmart saw its sales plunge after the extension wasn't extended. The UI extension wasn't extended on July 31st. So I think I think that sentiment might change, and it might change quickly.
Okay, Professor Cook, great to have you with us. We're going to cut it a little short because we don't want to upcut your former boss, Barack Obama, the 44th President of the United States. We're watching the convention carefully. They're just having an introductory tape right now where I believe that President Obama presented the Medal of Freedom to Joe Biden. And now we're going to go to the convention and the 44th President of the United States, Barack Obama.
As you've seen by now, this isn't a normal convention. It's not a normal time. So tonight, I want to talk as plainly as I can about the stakes in this election. Because what we do these next 76 days will echo through generations to come. I'm in Philadelphia, where our Constitution was drafted and signed. It wasn't a perfect document. It allowed for the inhumanity of slavery and failed to guarantee women, and even men who didn't own property, the right to participate in the political process. But embedded in this document was a North Star that would guide future generations. A system of representative government, a democracy, through which we could better realize our highest ideals. Through civil war and bitter struggles, we improved this Constitution to include the voices of those who'd once been left out. And gradually, we made this country more just and more equal and more free. The one constitutional office elected by all of the people is the presidency. So at a minimum, we should expect a president to feel a sense of responsibility for the safety and welfare of all 330 million of us, regardless of what we look like, how we worship, who we love, how much money we have, or who we voted for. But we should also expect a president to be the custodian of this democracy. We should expect that regardless of ego, ambition, or political beliefs, the president will preserve, protect, and defend the freedoms and ideals that so many Americans marched for, went to jail for, fought for, and died for. I have sat in the Oval Office with both of the men who are running for president. I never expected that my successor would embrace my vision or continue my policies. I did hope, for the sake of our country, that Donald Trump might show some interest in taking the job seriously, that he might come to feel the weight of the office and discover some reverence for the democracy that had been placed in his care. But he never did. For close to 4 years now, he has shown no interest in putting in the work, no interest in finding common ground, no interest in using the awesome power of his office to help anyone but himself and his friends. No interest in treating the presidency as anything but one more reality show that he can use to get the attention he craves. Donald Trump hasn't grown into the job because he can't. And the consequences of that failure are severe. 170,000 Americans dead. Millions of jobs gone, while those at the top take in more than ever. Our worst impulses unleashed, our proud reputation around the world badly diminished, and our democratic institutions threatened like never before. Now, I know that in times as polarized as these, most of you have already made up your mind. But maybe you're still not sure which candidate you'll vote for, or whether you'll vote at all. Maybe you're tired of the direction we're headed, but you can't see a better path yet, or you just don't know enough about the person who wants to lead us there. So let me tell you about my friend, Joe Biden. 12 years ago, when I began my search for a vice president, I didn't know I'd end up finding a brother. Joe and I come from different places, different generations, but what I quickly came to admire about Joe Biden is his resilience, born of too much struggle, his empathy, born of too much grief. Joe is a man who learned early on to treat every person he meets with respect and dignity, living by the words his parents taught him. No one's better than you, Joe, but you're better than nobody. That empathy, that decency, the belief that everybody counts, that's who Joe is. When he talks with someone who's lost her job, Joe remembers the night his father sat him down to say that he'd lost his. When Joe listens to a parent who's trying to hold it all together right now, he does it as a single dad who took the train back to Wilmington each and every night so he could tuck his kids into bed. When he meets with military families who've lost their hero, he does it as a kindred spirit, the parent of an American soldier, somebody whose faith has endured the hardest loss there is. For 8 years, Joe was the last one in the room whenever I faced a big decision. He made me a better president, and he's got the character and the experience to make us a better country. And in my friend Kamala Harris, he's chosen an ideal partner who is more than prepared for the job. Someone who knows what it's like to overcome barriers and who's made a career fighting to help others live out their own American dream. Along with the experience needed to get things done, Joe and Kamala have concrete policies that will turn their vision of a better, fairer, stronger country into reality. They will get this pandemic under control, like Joe did when he helped me manage H1N1 and prevent an Ebola outbreak from reaching our shores. They'll expand health care to more Americans, like Joe and I did 10 years ago, when he helped craft the Affordable Care Act and nail down the votes to make it the law. They'll rescue the economy, like Joe helped me do after the Great Recession. I asked him to manage the Recovery Act, which jump-started the longest stretch of job growth in history. And he sees this moment now not as a chance to get back to where we were, but to make long overdue changes so that our economy actually makes life a little easier for everybody. Whether it's the waitress trying to raise a kid on her own, or the shift worker always on the edge of getting laid off, or the student figuring out how to pay for next semester's classes. Joe and Kamala will restore our standing in the world. And as we've learned from this pandemic, that matters. Joe knows the world, and the world knows him. He knows that our true strength comes from setting an example that the world wants to follow. A nation that stands with democracy, not dictators. A nation that can inspire and mobilize others to overcome threats like climate change and terrorism, poverty and disease. But more than anything, what I know about Joe, what I know about Kamala, is that they actually care about every American, and that they care deeply about this democracy. They believe that in a democracy, the right to vote is sacred, and we should be making it easier for people to cast their ballots, not harder. They believe that no one, including the president, is above the law, and that no public official, including the president, should use their office to enrich themselves or their supporters. They understand that in this democracy, the commander-in-chief does not use the men and women of our military who are willing to risk everything to protect our nation as political props to deploy against peaceful protesters on our own soil. They understand that political opponents aren't un-American just because they disagree with you. A free press isn't the enemy, but the way we hold officials accountable. That our ability to work together to solve big problems like a pandemic depend on a fidelity to facts and science and logic, and not just making stuff up. None of this should be controversial. These shouldn't be Republican principles or Democratic principles. They are American principles. But at this moment, this president and those who enable him have shown they don't believe in these things. Tonight, I'm asking you to believe in Joe and Kamala's ability to lead this country out of these dark times and build it back better. But here's the thing. No single American can fix this country alone, not even a president. Democracy was never meant to be transactional. You give me your vote, I make everything better. It requires an active and informed citizenry. So I'm also asking you to believe in your own ability, to embrace your own responsibility as citizens, to make sure that the basic tenets of our democracy endure. Because that's what's at stake right now. Our democracy. Look, I understand why a lot of Americans are down on government. The way the rules have been set up and abused in Congress make it easier for special interests to stop progress than to make progress. Believe me, I know it. I understand why a white factory worker who's seen his wages cut or his job shipped overseas might feel like the government no longer looks out for him, and why a black mom might feel like it never looked out for her at all. I understand why a new immigrant might look around this country and wonder whether there's still a place for him here. Why a young person might look at politics right now, the circus of it all, the meanness and the lies and conspiracy theories, and think, what is the point? Well, here's the point. This president and those in power, those who benefit from keeping things the way they are counting on your cynicism. They know they can't win you over with their policies. So they're hoping to make it as hard as possible for you to vote and to convince you that your vote does not matter. That is how they win. That is how they get to keep making decisions that affect your life and the lives of the people you love. That's how the economy will keep getting skewed to the wealthy and well-connected. How our health systems will let more people fall through the cracks. That's how a democracy withers, until it's no democracy at all. And we cannot let that happen. Do not let them take away your power. Do not let them take away your democracy. Make a plan right now for how you are going to get involved and vote. Do it as early as you can and tell your family and friends how they can vote too. Do what Americans have done for over 2 centuries when faced with even tougher times than this. All those quiet heroes who found the courage to keep marching, keep pushing in the face of hardship and injustice. Last month, we lost a giant of American democracy in John Lewis. And some years ago, I sat down with John and a few remaining leaders of the early civil rights movement. One of them told me he never imagined he'd walk into the White House and see a president who looked like his grandson. And then he told me that he had looked it up. And it turned out that on the very day that I was born, he was marching into a jail cell, trying to end Jim Crow segregation in the South. What we do echoes through generations. Whatever our backgrounds, we are all the children of Americans who fought the good fight. Great-grandparents working in fire traps and sweatshops without rights or representation. Farmers losing their dreams to dust. Irish and Italians and Asians and Latinos told, go back where you come from. Jews and Catholics, Muslims and Sikhs made to feel suspect for the way they worshiped. Black Americans chained and whipped and hanged, spit on for trying to sit at lunch counters, beaten for trying to vote. If anyone had a right to believe that this democracy did not work and could not work, it was those Americans, our ancestors. They were on the receiving end of a democracy that had fallen short all their lives. They knew how far the daily reality of America strayed from the myth. And yet, instead of giving up, they joined together. And they said, somehow, some way, we are going to make this work. We are going to bring those words in our founding documents to life. I have seen that same spirit rising these past few years. Folks of every age and background who packed city centers and airports and rural roads so that families wouldn't be separated, so that another classroom wouldn't get shot up, so that our kids won't grow up on an uninhabitable planet. Americans of all races joining together to declare, in the face of injustice and brutality at the hands of the state, that Black lives matter. No more, but no less. So that no child in this country feels the continuing sting of racism. To the young people who led us this summer, telling us we need to be better, in so many ways, you are this country's dreams fulfilled. Earlier generations had to be persuaded that everyone has equal worth. For you, it's a given, a conviction. And what I want you to know is that for all its messiness and frustrations, your system of self-government can be harnessed to help you realize those convictions for all of us. You can give our democracy new meaning. You can take it to a better place. You're the missing ingredient. The ones who will decide whether or not America becomes the country that fully lives up to its creed. That work will continue long after this election. But any chance of success depends entirely on the outcome of this election. This administration has shown it will tear our democracy down if that's what it takes for them to win. So we have to get busy building it up by pouring all our efforts into these 76 days and by voting like never before for Joe and Kamala and candidates up and down the ticket so that we leave no doubt about what this country that we love stands for today and for all our days to come. Stay safe. God bless.
We have been listening to former President Barack Obama speaking to the convention from the Museum of the American Revolution in Philadelphia with a full-throated endorsement of Joe Biden as candidate for president, saying he is actually his brother now, not just his vice president, also saying Kamala Harris was a wonderful choice. But I dare say that maybe the most remarkable parts of the speech were what he had to say about his successor, Donald J. Trump. I'm not sure when in recent history we've heard a president criticize his successor as strongly as he did, saying he didn't even take the job seriously, treated it like a reality show. So certainly there'll be a lot of comment about that. You can agree or disagree with President Obama. I dare say you cannot question the fact that he is eloquent. And to get a reaction now, we're going to go to Kevin Cirilli. He's our Bloomberg chief Washington correspondent, also anchor of Sound On weekdays on Bloomberg Radio. So, Kevin, I'm listening to this. It's really quite remarkable. It reminds us about Barack Obama and the power of language. At the same time, it's hard to get a read right now for me about who else is paying attention to this and what effect it's having across the country.
It was stoic and optimistic, a rallying cry to African Americans to get out the vote on November 3rd, but also an address to the Obama coalition, something that propelled him in 2008 and again to re-election in 2012, to keep the faith and keep on. He is speaking just before Senator Kamala Harris will address the convention. In terms of who hears the message, viewership, as you alluded to, David, has been remarkably in decline in the virtual convention era. And it's unknown whether or not the former president's speech would have the same resounding effect and carry the same weight as it would have had with the pomp and circumstance and the pageantry in a Milwaukee-packed convention hall stadium. We just don't know. What we do know is that in just moments, Senator Kamala Harris will deliver the most important speech of her political career as she now inherits the next generation of Democratic leadership to bolster, as she would like to do, the Biden ticket, to give it credence not just to the base, but also on the campaign trail, both virtually and throughout the country, to try to mobilize and increase voter turnouts in these all-important swing states. David?
Kevin, thank you so very much for being with us. Kevin Cirilli, our chief Washington correspondent. And now we want to bring back in Rick Davis and Jeannie Zaino. As Kevin just indicated, we do have Kamala Harris about to come up. We will carry that live, as it were. One of the things that struck me, Jeannie, is the contrast between this Barack Obama today and the one in Boston in 2004, when most of us first really paid attention to him when he gave that red state, blue state speech. It's such a different venue. He's such a different man in many ways.
He is. And I don't think we've seen him that emotional. At some points, it looked like he might be tearing up, actually, and very emotional, a very passionate plea to Democrats to get out and vote in 76 days, he said. And I think if we're wondering who's watching, one person we know is watching is the president, because he's tweeting in all caps about Barack Obama's speech. So he is clearly watching, and it is impacting the president, who is questioning what Barack Obama and, of course, Joe Biden are doing and talking to his millions of supporters on Twitter. So it has been quite a back and forth. And as you mentioned, not common for a former president to talk so strongly about his successor.
So Rick, I'd love your perspective on this, because I think a lot of what we've heard on this convention so far, I would say, is people speaking to their base, really trying to motivate their base to come out. I thought a lot of what President Obama was trying to do was actually talk to people who maybe haven't decided yet. He said, a lot of you decided, but think about this. He was really, I thought, trying to appeal to people who aren't really committed right now.
Yeah, I think this has been a consistent theme throughout the convention. mobilize your base, make sure everybody's going to vote. All the instructions on how to vote and what to do have been really quite instrumental, I think, in how this convention's been orchestrated. But almost everyone has been trying to reach out to sort of those unaligned voters to see if they can bring them aboard the Biden train. There is a moment here during Pelosi's speech where she talked about a blue wave taking over the House, the Senate, and the presidency. And so you can tell this is a convention that's pretty full of itself. They think they can really score a win here, and they want to go out and get voters they've never gotten before. Thus, all the concentration last night on Republicans. I would say there's no question where the Obama household stands on Donald Trump. Both his wife and he really did a number on the president, and I think it will be part of the story that comes out of this convention.
So, Rick, let me jump ahead and just ask, is this a new day now where we're going to have presidents attack their successors, or is this a one-off, do you think?
Well, you know, it's really interesting because part of what Donald Trump is tweeting is, look, you didn't help your successor, you know, during the primary. Of course, the tradition is that the president who has just left office doesn't put a finger on the scale of the primary process. And of course, Donald Trump doesn't believe that at all, right? He wants his finger on the scale all day, all night. And so I do think you see a disintegration of some of the institutional discipline that has been going on. But this is what Obama was stressing tonight, is these institutions matter. Our democracy is at stake. It's not just an election. It's the institution of democracy itself that's going to be voted on. Yeah, and
you, Jeannie, you referred to the tweet from the president who's basically saying how did it take him so long to endorse Joe Biden. It doesn't look like he did Joe Biden much harm. You could even argue he did him a favor by making him really deliver on his own and say he did it on his own, particularly in South Carolina.
Yeah, and it's customary to wait and let the voters have their say, which is what the former President Barack Obama said he was doing and what he did. And when it looked like Joe Biden was the presumptive nominee, he's been incredibly supportive. So, you know, I think the president's criticism, President Trump, falls flat in that regard. But I think is an indication that Barack Obama continues to get under President Trump's skin, as he has done since before President Trump ran for office, quite frankly, and continues to. And I would say on this issue of institutions, it's no surprise that we find President Obama is standing in front of the Constitution, showing reverence for the institutions of government and office.
Okay, we are now waiting right now for Kamala Harris to be speaking. She has begun, and we're going to go to that, I believe. Here she is.
Anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment. And we celebrate the women who fought for that right. Yet so many of the black women who helped secure that victory were still prohibited from voting long after its ratification. But they were undeterred.
I'm told that this is actually Senator Kamala Harris on recording. This is a package which is playing at the convention. My mistake. I thought that actually she'd begun talking, and it's very important we bring that to her. I'm sorry, I'm corrected. It is live. Let's go back.
And the generations that followed worked to make democracy and opportunity real in the lives of all of us who followed. They paved the way for the trailblazing leadership of Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. And these women inspired us to pick up the torch and fight on. Women like Mary Church Terrell, Mary Cloyd Bethune, Fannie Lou Hamer, and Diane Nash, Constance Baker Motley, and the great Shirley Chisholm. We're not often taught their stories, but as Americans, we all stand on their shoulders. And there's another woman whose name isn't known, whose story isn't shared, another woman whose shoulders I stand on. And that's my mother, Shamala Gopalan Harris. She came here from India at age 19 to pursue her dream of curing cancer. At the University of California, Berkeley, she met my father, Donald Harris, who had come from Jamaica to study economics. They fell in love in that most American way while marching together for justice in the civil rights movement of the 1960s. In the streets of Oakland and Berkeley, I got a stroller's eye view of people getting into what the great John Lewis called good trouble. When I was 5, my parents split, and my mother raised us mostly on her own. Like so many mothers, she worked around the clock to make it work, packing lunches before we woke up and paying bills after we went to bed, helping us with homework at the kitchen table and shuttling us to church for choir practice. She made it look easy, though it never was. My mother instilled in my sister Maya and me the values that would chart the course of our lives. She raised us to be proud, strong Black women, and she raised us to know and be proud of our Indian heritage. She taught us to put family first, the family you're born into and the family you choose. Family is my husband, Doug, who I met on a blind date set up by my best friend. Family is our beautiful children, Cole and Ella, who call me Mamala. Family is my sister. Family is my best friend, my nieces, and my godchildren. Family is my uncles, my aunts, and my chitties. Family is Mrs. Shelton, my second mother who lived 2 doors down and helped raise me. Family is my beloved Alpha Kappa Alpha, our Divine Nine, and my HBCU brothers and sisters. Family is the friends I turn to when my mother, the most important person in my life, passed away from cancer. And even as she taught us to keep our family at the center of our world, she also pushed us to see a world beyond ourselves. She taught us to be conscious and compassionate about the struggles of all people, to believe public service is a noble cause and the fight for justice is a shared responsibility. That led me to become a lawyer, a district attorney, attorney general, and a United States senator. And at every step of the way, I've been guided by the words I spoke from the first time I stood in a courtroom. Kamala Harris, for the people. I have fought for children and survivors of sexual assault. I fought against transnational criminal organizations. I took on the biggest banks and helped take down one of the biggest for-profit colleges. I know a predator when I see one. My mother taught me that service to others gives life purpose and meaning. And oh, how I wish she were here tonight, but I know she's looking down on me from above. I keep thinking about that 25-year-old Indian woman, all of 5 feet tall, who gave birth to me at Kaiser Hospital in Oakland, California. On that day, she probably could have never imagined that I would be standing before you now and speaking these words. I accept your nomination for Vice President of the United States of America. I do so committed to the values she taught me, to the word that teaches me to walk by faith and not by sight, and to a vision passed on through generations of Americans, one that Joe Biden shares, a vision of our nation as a beloved community where all are welcome, no matter what we look like, no matter where we come from or who we love. A country where we may not agree on every detail, but we are united by the fundamental belief that every human being is of infinite worth, deserving of compassion, dignity, and respect. A country where we look out for one another, where we rise and fall as one, where we face our challenges and celebrate our triumphs together. Today, that country feels distant. Donald Trump's failure of leadership has cost lives and livelihoods. If you're a parent struggling with your child's remote learning, or you're a teacher struggling on the other side of that screen, you know what we're doing right now is not working. And we are a nation that is grieving the loss of life, the loss of jobs, the loss of opportunities, the loss of normalcy, and yes, the loss of certainty. And while this virus touches us all, we got to be honest, it is not an equal opportunity offender. Black, Latino, and Indigenous people are suffering and dying disproportionately. And this is not a coincidence. It is the effect of structural racism, of inequities in education and technology, healthcare and housing, job security and transportation, the injustice in reproductive and maternal health care, in the excessive use of force by police, and in our broader criminal justice system. This virus, it has no eyes, and yet it knows exactly how we see each other and how we treat each other. And let's be clear, there is no vaccine for racism. We've got to do the work. For George Floyd, for Breonna Taylor, for the lives of too many others to name, for our children, and for all of us. We've got to do the work to fulfill that promise of equal justice under law. Because here's the thing, none of us are free until all of us are free. So we're at an inflection point. The constant chaos leaves us adrift. The incompetence makes us feel afraid. The callousness makes us feel alone. It's a lot. And here's the thing. We can do better and deserve so much more. We must elect a president who will bring something different, something better, and do the important work. A president who will bring all of us together, Black, white, Latino, Asian, Indigenous, to achieve the future we collectively want. We must elect Joe Biden. And I will tell you, I knew Joe as vice president. I knew Joe on the campaign trail. And I first got to know Joe as the father of my friend. So Joe's son, Beau, and I served as attorneys general of our states, Delaware and California. During the Great Recession, he and I spoke on the phone nearly every day, working together to win back billions of dollars for homeowners from the big banks that foreclosed on people's homes. And Beau and I, we would talk about his family, how as a single father, Joe would spend 4 hours every day riding the train back and forth from Wilmington to Washington. Beau and Hunter got to have breakfast every morning with their dad. They went to sleep every night with the sound of his voice reading bedtime stories. And while they endured an unspeakable loss, those two little boys always knew that they were deeply, unconditionally loved. And what also moved me about Joe is the work that he did as he was going back and forth. This is the leader who wrote the Violence Against Women Act and enacted the assault weapons ban, who as vice president implemented the Recovery Act, which brought our country back from the Great Recessions. He championed the Affordable Care Act, protecting millions of Americans with pre-existing conditions, who spent decades promoting American values and interests around the world. Joe, he believes we stand with our allies and stand up to our adversaries. Right now, we have a president who turns our tragedies into political weapons. Joe will be a president who turns our challenges into purpose. Joe will bring us together to build an economy that doesn't leave anyone behind, where a good-paying job is the floor, not the ceiling. Joe will bring us together to end this pandemic and make sure that we are prepared for the next one. Joe will bring us together to squarely face and dismantle racial injustice, furthering the work of generations. Joe and I believe that we can build that beloved community, one that is strong and decent, just and kind, one in which we can all see ourselves. That's the vision that our parents and grandparents fought for, the vision that made my own life possible, the vision that makes the American promise, for all its complexities and imperfections, a promise worth fighting for. So make no mistake, the road ahead is not easy. We may stumble. We may fall short. But I pledge to you that we will act boldly and deal with our challenges honestly. We will speak truths, and we will act with the same faith in you that we ask you to place in us. We believe that our country, all of us, will stand together for a better future. And we already are. We see it in the doctors, the nurses, the home health care workers, and frontline workers who are risking their lives to save people they've never met. We see it in the teachers and truck drivers, the factory workers and farmers, the postal workers and poll workers, all putting their own safety on the line to help us get through this pandemic. And we see it in so many of you who are working, not just to get us through our current crisis, but to somewhere better. There's something happening all across our country. It's not about Joe or me. It's about you. And it's about us. People of all ages and colors and creeds who are, yes, taken to the streets, and also persuading our family members, rallying our friends, organizing our neighbors, and getting out the vote. And we have shown that when we vote, we expand access to health care and expand access to the ballot box and ensure that more working families can make a decent living. And I'm so inspired by a new generation. You are pushing us to realize the ideals of our nation, pushing us to live the values we share: decency and fairness, justice and love. You are patriots who remind us that to love our country is to fight for the ideals of our country. In this election, we have a chance to change the course of history. We're all in this fight. You, me, and Joe, together. What an awesome responsibility. What an awesome privilege. So let's fight with conviction. Let's fight with hope. Let's fight with confidence in ourselves and a commitment to each other, to the America we know is possible, the America we love. And years from now, this moment will have passed, and our children and our grandchildren will look in our eyes, and they're going to ask us, where were you when the stakes were so high? They will ask us, what was it like? And we will tell them. We will tell them not just how we felt, we will tell them what we did. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.
We have been listening to Senator Kamala Harris addressing the convention from Wilmington, Delaware, from a hall there, in a rather, I must say, passionate and emotional speech. Emotion both in the tone of her voice, but also in the words that she spoke, really addressing the issues of racial justice, of inclusion, of equality, and is talking about us really acting together and trying to get out the vote. She said of Joe Biden that he will take our challenges and turn them into purpose. And she laid out some of the purposes she thinks are so essential and why she thinks Joe Biden is the right person to do that. So, Rick Davis, I want to turn first to you, and then we'll come back to Jeannie here. Rick, what was your reaction to this? As I say, it felt like a very emotional plea.
I totally agree with you, David. I thought it was actually a very conversational speech. It wasn't soaring rhetoric, much like President Obama did in his speech right before this. It was down to earth. She talked about Joe, her friend. She talked about his accomplishments and what brought her to this stage. The first third of the speech was almost a rendition of, I felt like I was at her house for Thanksgiving dinner, talking about the family, and I felt like we got to know her story a little bit better. And I think that was one of the things that she needed to accomplish tonight, and she checked that box.
And for our radio listeners, what we've just had happen is the presidential nominee, Joe Biden, has now come out with his wife, and also Kamala Harris's husband's joined hers. I must say they are socially distanced appropriately across the across the podium. But so Joe Biden has shown up to congratulate Kamala Harris. So Jeannie, your reactions.
I agree with Rick. It was deeply personal for the first about a third to a half of the speech, which is important because you really do get to know who she is. And I think the goal she wanted to set out was that we can all see ourselves in her story, and it is quite a story when you listen to it. I also thought the staging, I'm mesmerized by this staging. You know, you're right, everybody's socially distant. Obviously, there's not that many people there, but they're speaking in a big room, and seems to be a few people scattered in the audience. Yeah. But what I was struck by at this historic moment when she accepted the nomination, no applause, just deafening silence. And, you know, it just reminds you of the moment that we're living in. And I think the Democrats did this on purpose to remind people we are here in their minds because of the president's inability to handle this virus, and to tell people that the Biden presidency would change that. But, you know, so I was just mesmerized by this staging.
So, Rick, as I said earlier in our broadcast tonight, you've been there, you've done that. You've run a presidential campaign as well as running other campaigns for John McCain. As you watched Kamala Harris tonight, the nominee for vice president, did she do what Joe Biden needed her to do?
Yeah, I think she defined herself to the American public. She took some good shots at their opponent, Donald Trump, and she did a very good job, I thought, of talking about Joe Biden's track record, you know, what he's accomplished in public life, which I actually think this convention could have done more of. He's quite an accomplished guy. But I think what she did, really the key thing, is set herself up to be the advocate. She used a phrase very early in her speech, Kamala Harris for the people. And I can see that on a lot of banners throughout the course of this campaign until November.
Yeah, exactly. It's not lost on any of us. She was a prosecutor, San Francisco, and then before she was Attorney General of the state of California. And it will play in an interesting way when she has to debate the current Vice President, Mike Pence. I think it's October 7th.
Yeah, and that's going to be fascinating because she is a very tough debater, as Joe Biden knows firsthand. And the vice president himself is a good debater, but their styles are so different that it's going to be fascinating to see how that comes out. And I think we're going to be able to, watch as she moves through the next few weeks, few months to see how she's going to attack the president. I think we're going to see a lot more of that on the trail.
One thing we didn't hear, Rick Davis, at least I did not hear, is really directly addressing some of the unrest in the cities. She talked about George Floyd. She talked about Breonna Taylor, things like that. She didn't talk about the need to keep our streets safe.
Yeah, I thought one of the things that got relative short shift tonight, I agree with you, was social justice issues. We always assumed going into this convention that between the COVID pandemic, the economic collapse, and unemployment, and that issue of social justice would almost be equal time and attention. But no question, the social justice issues have taken a back seat.
Okay, we're going to close out our broadcast tonight with a very special guest. She is Hilda Solis, Los Angeles County Supervisor. Ms. Solis earlier served as Secretary of Labor in the Obama administration, and just like Senator Harris, she addressed the convention herself earlier this evening. So, Ms. Solis, thank you so much for being with us. Really appreciate you joining us. We have Rick Davis and Jeannie Zaino as well. Earlier in the evening, you addressed the convention, as I say. You said that Kamala Harris is your friend, and you gave her credit particularly for some economic initiatives, things like in the auto industry and with home care workers. Tell us about that.
Well, I want to say that, I know Senator Kamala Harris. I was one of her early supporters when she ran for U.S. Senate and went back many times to go back to lobby when we needed special assistance for the County of Los Angeles. She helped us out tremendously on fighting ahead on immigration reform and job creation, green jobs, as well as our transportation project. And I want to say that she was also fighting for better salaries for in-home healthcare workers and helping to raise the minimum wage. She has always been on the forefront, never been afraid to do any of that. And she has also taken on the banks, and she won. And that says a lot for her tenacity and her wherewithal. And she's that kind of a person who will just go to bat for the small person, for the small guy, regardless of who you are. She'll stand up for the right principles and things that she knows that we believe in. So I'm really happy that Joe Biden made this decision. It's going to help us. We need to really rally the troops and get a whole bunch of people engaged again. So many people are beaten down right now because of COVID. They lost their jobs. She's absolutely right what she said tonight about people feeling very, very left out of any conversation about any position of being able to get help from this federal government right now. And we have to find a cure. And the cure is a new person in the White House with the VP who's going to work every single day and not go out, take time to golf, and then talk and say, oh, it's all a hoax. It doesn't exist. This does exist. And we see it here in Los Angeles County. As a county board of supervisor, we know that we have high rates of COVID, and it really is hurting people that are essential workers, people that have lost their jobs, and people that are on the verge of losing their jobs.
Secretary Solis, one of the things I want to do is get back to Kamala Harris, and you know her well. Is there a specific issue that as vice president she would champion? We know that in many cases in the past, vice presidents have been able to take a couple of issue sets and really drive them within the administration. Is there anything in particular that you think Senator Harris would champion as vice president?
I think she's going to fight really hard for the economy to make sure that everyone gets an equitable, fair share at good salaries. She did it here in California, and I know she's going to continue to do it there. And that's a broader discussion that has to happen, because even as you see President Trump and his rewarding of his friends and folks that don't really need any relief through the coronavirus, they receive the benefits. What about the other 70-80% of the public that didn't get anything? She's going to make that a fight, and I know she's going to be on it every day. She's going to expand healthcare. We're going to make sure that we have a public option and that people can keep their insurance, but we're going to do a better job. We're going to help also safeguard those young dreamers that she talked about. Instead of tearing people apart because of your religion or how you look or what side of the fence you were raised on, she's going to say, no, we're going to treat everyone the same. And that's the same thing, same principle that Joe Biden has. And I was so happy to serve with him. I can't tell you how happy I am that this night And tomorrow night's even going to be more special.
You alluded to this a little bit, and I just wonder, for those of us across the United States who are just getting to know Senator Harris, and you know her being from California, what would you say is something that we don't realize about her? I mean, she served in the Senate for a period of time now, but what do you know of being from California in terms of the way that she governs, and what could we expect if indeed she becomes vice president?
Well, she is a very popular person, I will tell you that. And she has a strong following. Women look up to her, young women who look like me and like her little ones look up to her because they see themselves in a role model like that. She's going to fight for pay equity. She's going to fight for women's rights. She's going to care about the mom who has to raise her children, tend to them, get them to school. She's going to care about the person who's taking care of her elderly parents. She's going to care about that worker that has to go out, that puts his life out on the line every day to feed his family. She is a daughter of immigrants. She was raised by a single mother. She knows how hard it is to work, but family means so much. And to me, that's a value that I think resonates with a lot of people in our country right now. And basically, if we're going to take on this fight in November the 3rd, it's going to be about unity, bringing everybody together. And she's been able to do that. She has a cross appeal from every sector.
Madam Secretary, we cannot thank you enough for joining us this evening. That's Hilda Solis. She's LA County Supervisor and former U.S. Secretary of Labor. I also want to thank our Bloomberg political contributors, Rick Davis of Stone Court Capital and Jeannie Zaino, Professor of Political Science at Iona College. Tomorrow we're going to have not 1 but 2 hours of live coverage starting at 9 p.m. Eastern Time as Joe Biden addresses the Democratic National Convention and lays out his vision for the nation. This is coverage of the Democratic National Convention on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Westin, and this is Bloomberg.
How have you changed your activities in the month and a half or so since the implementation of the law?
Before any evidence, they just claim presume that I'm guilty. So, this is not the way the law is. I should be presumed innocent. And one thing I can say from the statement they made is, we have never support independence of Hong Kong.
The Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office under the State Council puts this statement out before you've even been officially charged, before there's a trial, before there is a verdict. Do you feel you can get a fair trial here?
Freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion. All this we are guaranteed in our basic law, which has been what we are fighting for. No more, no less.
This is Bloomberg Markets Asia. I'm Haslinda Ahmed in Singapore.
And I'm Yvonne Mann. You're watching Bloomberg Markets Asia. Taking a look at markets right now, certainly seeing that sell-off really get a little bit worse now, Has.
Well, that's right. Jitters in the market. We have the MSCI Asia Pac Index down by more than 1% right now. Let's bring in our next guest, or our guest right now, Tuan Huynh. It's CIO for Asia and Europe at Deutsche Bank Wealth Management. He joins us from Frankfurt. Huynh, always good to have you with us. We have, the benchmark here down the most since mid-July. Has the narrative changed at all in the market?
Not really. I think today the market is looking at the Fed comments, which of course is talking about some uncertainties down the road, which I think shouldn't be a surprise. So it's just a reason to take some profit. So nothing has really changed.
So in terms of momentum, what will drive it? Will it be, tech continuing the rally, lifting the benchmarks from here?
Could potentially be. We are still positive for the quality growth, which includes also tech, but also healthcare companies. So that has always been our call for some time now. And we have seen, of course, this week, the NASDAQ making some new highs, the S&P 500 also reaching a new all-time high. So it is mostly driven by tech companies, and we think this can continue. But of course, there's still hope to find a vaccine that might bring us back to some sort of normality, I would say. And also here, another hope for the U.S. to find some agreement here for a next fiscal program so that the recovery can continue in this way.
Tuan, you have a little bit more of a contrarian view when it comes to where the dollar goes. It seems to be a growing consensus now that this downtrend of the dollar will continue. We're not seeing that here today, but you're thinking that it can actually strengthen. What's the case behind that?
Yeah, so I think what is driven the dollar weaker currently is twofold. One was, of course, the rising number in infection over the past few weeks, which is now trending down, which is a good sign. And secondly, I already mentioned the markets are kind of disappointed that there is no agreement on another fiscal deal. So the dollar went weaker. So our base scenario is still that there will be some sort of agreement, maybe not to an extent the Democrats would like to have. But if this is coming, that should rather at least short-term speak for the U.S. dollar. And if you also look from a technical pattern, the dollar looks pretty much oversold. So hence a technical reaction could also be in the cards here. And therefore, we have a slightly positive view for the dollar over the next few weeks, even months.
Tuan, we're going to leave it there. Tuan Huynh from Deutsche Bank Wealth Management joining us from Frankfurt. Take a look at those markets, though. The sell-off really gaining some momentum right now. The likes of Taiwan falling the most in 5 months.